Hello, good day everyone. So our report would be the close-up study of what is utility analysis and illustration. So para maintindihan nyo, para magkaroon kayo ng idea about the words and images associated with utility analysis, Miss Hilario and I will present a hypothetical scenario lang involving utility-related issues that arise in a corporate personal office. So, parang ikwento lang namin, no? So, consider these following details. So, the company is a South American package delivery company called Federali Express. The question at hand concerns the cost-effectiveness of adding a new test to the process of hiring delivery drivers. So, when we say cost-effectiveness, ito yung pag-produce ng good results without costing a lot of money. So, Dr. Wanda Carlos, the personal director of Federali Express, has been charged with the task of evaluating the utility of adding a new test to the procedures currently in place for hiring delivery drivers. So, ang current policy ng company is dapat ang drivers meron silang valid driver's license and walang criminal record. So, once hired, the delivery driver is placed on probation o yung process or period of testing or observing the character or abilities of the new drivers. And it is 3 months, during which time on-the-job supervisory ratings or OTJSRs are collected on random work days. If scores on the OTJSRs are satisfactory at the end of the probationary period, then the new delivery driver is deemed qualified. Only qualified drivers attain permanent employee status and benefits at Federali Express. So, yung bagong evaluation procedure na gina-consider from a cost-benefit perspective is the Federali Express Road Test or the FERT. So, the FERT is a procedure that takes less than 1 hour and entails the applicant driving an FE truck in actual traffic to a given destination, parallel parking, and then driving back to the start point. So, mas madali siya, no, compared to OTJSR. But the question is, does the FERT provide evidence criterion-related validity? Meaning, how accurately does the FERT measures the outcome it was designed to measure? So, if so, what COT score instituted to designate passing and failing scores would provide the greatest utility? Or ano yung COT score, if any, would be most useful for defining passing and failing scores? So, these are preliminary questions that Dr. Carlos seeks to answer upon tackling the issues of utility. They will be addressed in a study exploring the predictive validity of the FERT. So, ang ginawa ni Dr. Carlos is nag-conduct siya ng study in which a new group of drivers is hired based sa lumang requirements ng company, which is yung possession of a valid driver's license and no criminal record. However, to shed light on the question of the value of adding a new test to the process, these new hires must also take the FERT. So, subsequent to their hiring and after taking the FERT, these new employees are all placed on probation for the usual period of 3 months. During this probationary period, yung usual on-the-job supervisory ratings or yung OTJSR is kinokollect on randomly selected workdays. The total scores the new employees achieve on the OTJSRs will be used to address not only the question of whether the new hire is qualified, but also questions concerning the added value of the FERT in the hiring process. So, after nung 3-month probationary period para sa mga new hires, si Dr. Carlos naman is for sure naka-accumulate na siya ng quite a bit of data, including yung scores on the predictor measure, which is yung FERT, and also yung scores sa criterion measure, the OTJSR. So, looking at these data, nag-iisip si Dr. Carlos siguro ba about sa pag-set ng score, ng cut score for the FERT. Hindi naman pwede yung basta-basta ka lang magsiset ng score na gusto mo. So, for assistance in setting a cut score for hiring and in answering questions related to the utility of the FERT, Dr. Carlos purchases a computer program entitled Utility Analysis Made Easy. So, remember this is just a hypothetical example or situation para mas maintindihan nyo lang. So, nag-purchase siya ng computer program entitled Utility Analysis Made Easy. And itong program na ito ay nag-contain ng definitions for a wealth of utility-related terms and also provides the tools for automatically creating computer-generated utility-related tables and graphs. So, in what follows, we learn along with Dr. Carlos how utility analysis can be made easy, or at the very least, somewhat less complicated. After entering all of the data from this study, click nyo na sa program na yun yung command set cut score, and ito yung lumabas. So, may 6 na klase ng terms ang nasa table. I remember na report to ni Carl sa XP site. So, I'm sure familiar na kayo dito. First is the term HIT. It means that the passing score on the FERT is associated with satisfactory performance on the OTJSR, and the failing score on the FERT is associated with unsatisfactory performance on the criterion. So, when we say criterion, ito yung principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided. So, this implies that the predictor test has successfully predicted the on-the-job outcome. Kung sino ang qualified, syempre yun yung hired. And yung mga unqualified naman, malamang sila yung hindi na-hire. So, ganun ang HIT. Correct classification siya. Next is ang miss, which is defined as a mistake. So, kabaliktaran siya ng HIT. It has failed to predict on-the-job outcome. And ang nangyayari dito, kung sino yung mga unqualified, yun yung na-hire. Yung mga qualified naman, yun yung mga hindi na-hire. Kaya siya naging incorrect classification or a mistake. Ang hit rate naman and ang miss rate, ganun pa rin. But when we say rate, ang proportion lang siya ng mga drivers that an assessment tool accurately and inaccurately identifies as possessing or exhibiting a particular trait, ability, behavior, or attribute. So, sa hit rate, this means that the proportion of FE drivers with a passing FERT score who perform satisfactorily after 3 months based on OTJSRs. Also, the proportion of FE drivers with a failing FERT score who do not perform satisfactorily after 3 months based on OTJSRS. So, this implies that the proportion of qualified drivers with a passing FERT score who actually gain permanent employee status after 3 months on the job. Also, the proportion of unqualified drivers with a failing FERT score who are let go after 3 months. Ang miss rate naman, the proportion of FE drivers with a passing FERT score who perform unsatisfactorily after 3 months based on OTJSRs. Also, the proportion of FE drivers with a failing FERT score who perform satisfactorily after 3 months based on OTJSRS. This implies that the proportion of drivers whom the FERT inaccurately predicted to be qualified. Also, the proportion of drivers whom the FERT inaccurately predicted to be unqualified. False positive. It falsely indicates that the test taker possesses or exhibits a particular trait, ability, behavior, or attribute. So, meaning, the FERT indicates that the new hire will perform successfully on the job, but, in fact, the new driver does not. False negative naman ay kabaliktaran na ng false positive. This means that the FERT indicates na yung new hire will not perform successfully on the job, but in fact, the new driver would have performed successfully. So, pag ang basihan lang is yung FERT, di dapatin i-hire but driver would have been rated as qualified. Ngayon, there is no single all-around best way to determine the cut score to use on the FERT. The cut score chosen will reflect the goal of the selection process. So, after reviewing Table 1 and all of the material on terms, including hit, miss, false positive, and false negative, Dr. Carlos elects to continue and is presented with the following 4 options from which to choose. So, dito sa 4 na options, pipili ka ng option that best reflects the company's hiring policy and objectives. So, I will shortly discuss to you the first option and the rest will be discussed to you by Ms. Hilario. So, ayun na nga, no, since si Dr. Carlos, curious man siya sa outcome na associated with each of these 4 options, syempre, ang main goal niya is para i-evaluate yung usefulness or yung utility of adding a new test to the procedures currently in place for hiring delivery drivers. So, Dr. Carlos wishes to explore all of them. She begins by selecting option 1 or select applicants without using the FERT. So, ito yung graph na lumabas. Figure 1, base rate data for Federally Express. Generally speaking, pag sinabi nating base rate, it is defined as the proportion of people in the population that possess a particular trait, behavior, characteristic, or attribute. Pero dito na study, base rate refers to the proportion of new hired drivers who would go on to perform satisfactorily on the criterion measure, the OTJSRs, and be deemed qualified regardless of whether or not a test such as the FERT existed and regardless of their score on the FERT if it were administered. So, kung makikita nyo sa graph, the base rate is represented in figure 1 by the number of drivers na nag-fall above the dash horizontal line or yung minimally accepted performance line as compared to the total number of scores. In other words, the base rate is equal to the ratio of qualified applicants to the total number of applicants. So, yung mga dots dyan, yan yung nagre-represent sa mga driver na nag-take ng OTJSR. And kung saan sila na-plot sa graph, yun yung kanilang naging score. Ang total number of the drivers were 60 and ang nakaabot lang or nakalagpas lang sa minimally accepted performance is 30. Without or before the use of the FERT, any applicant with a valid driver's license and no criminal record is nahahire agad for a permanent position for or as an FE driver. Drivers could be classified lang into 2 groups based on their OTJSRs. Satisfactory and unsatisfactory lang ang classification. Those whose driving was considered to be satisfactory located above the dash horizontal line, and those driving was considered to be unsatisfactory below the dash line. So without the use of the FERT, then all applicants were hired. However, the base rate of successful performance shown in figure 1 was only 0.50 or 50%. This means that only half of the drivers hired, 30 of 60, were considered qualified drivers by their supervisor. This also shows a miss rate of 0.50 because half of the drivers turned out to perform below the minimally accepted level. Yet, because scores on the FERT and OTJSRs is, kung mapapansin nyo sa graph, ay positively correlated sila. When you say positively correlated, makikita nyo ang direction ng dots sa graph na both variables tend to move in the same direction. Nagpa-increase sila pareho. So, the FERT can be used to help select the individuals who are likely to be rated as qualified drivers. Thus, using the FERT is a good idea, but how should it be used? One method would entail top-down selection. Meron ito sa IO psychology natin. That is, a permanent position could be offered first sa kung sino ang nakakuha ng highest score on the FERT. followed by an individual with the next highest FERT score, and so on until all available positions are filled. As you can see in the figure, if permanent positions are offered only to individuals with the top 20 FERT scores, then OTJSR ratings of the permanent hires will mostly be in the satisfactory performer range. However, such a top-down selection policy can be discriminatory or may mga disadvantages din siya. Without the use of the FERT, it is estimated that about one-half of all new hires would exhibit satisfactory performance. That is, the base rate would be 0.50. Without the use of the FERT, the miss rate would also be 0.50. This is because half of all drivers hired would be deemed unqualified based on the OTJSRs at the end of the probationary period. So that ends the part of my report, but it is not yet finished now. So now I will give the floor to Ms. Hilario to discuss the continuation of our report. Thank you.